Hi and welcome, I'm Andy Miochin. You are watching A News. Here are the headlines. Israel says Gaza's Rafah crossing will stay closed over Hamas's delay in returning the bodies of deceased hostages. 6 people killed as the Israeli military opens fire on Palestinians in Gaza. Hundreds of French farmers take to the streets of Paris to protest against a new trade deal. Thank you for tuning in. We begin with the latest news coming out of the Middle East. Hamas has informed mediators it will begin transferring bodies of 4 deceased Israeli hostages to Israel at 10 p.m. local time on Tuesday. An official involved in the operation told Reuters. Earlier, Israeli officials said the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt would stay closed at least through Wednesday, and the flow of aid into the Palestinian enclave would be reduced to put pressure on the group to hand over the bodies of the hostages it is holding. Hamas has said returning all of them could take time because not all the hostages' burial sites are known. Meanwhile, the Israeli military confirmed that its soldiers shot dead 6 Palestinians in Gaza City. The IDF said in a statement that several suspects were spotted crossing the yellow line, which marks Israeli-controlled areas under the ceasefire deal, and approaching troops. Hamas called the killings a violation of the ceasefire agreement. We now go live to Tel Aviv and our Lou Brown, who's at the Ichilov Hospital, one of the facilities where Israeli hostages released on Monday are receiving care. Hi Lou, you've had a chance to speak to families of some of the hostages. What did they tell you, and what's the latest on the condition of those returned?
Yes, thank you, Andy. I've been here all day, and first we'll go right to what's happening now. I'm currently in the hallway of Ichilov Hospital, but just down there, about 100 meters down, the press conference of the families of those 5 are talking and sharing their thoughts on the return of their loved ones. Now, I did have a chance to speak to a few of the family members. The father of Omri Cohen was most notable, and the last one I spoke to. I'm sure once the press conference is over, I will have a chance to speak to more. But what's really interesting to note here is that I couldn't translate in real time, but I did pick up on a few things that the mother of, let me get this right before Omri Miran said Witkoff, as well as Trump and Kushner. Now, I'm not sure in what relation that is, but those are very notable and very easily translatable things for me to pick up on. Equally, although I may not be able to translate everything that was coming in, the one thing I could was translate the mood. Now, once I entered, it was very evident that it was falling silent once the families were about to come in. So I stood there, and the whole host of media waited for the families to come round the corner and give their press statement. And during that, it was dead silence. And once the speeches were given, it was just somber reflection, and that was the mood that started.
Well, you've been covering this story as it unfolded. What's the mood in Israel like currently on the ceasefire? We've seen reports of the Israeli military conducting new operations in the Gaza Strip despite the truce.
Well, the mood where I've been in Tel Aviv, most notably in Hostage Square, and today in the hospital, Ichilov Hospital, it's been quite joyous, really, and quite happy, because where we're standing, the hostages have been returned, and I've been talking to the families of those loved ones. But that's not to say that the story hasn't reached its end. Now, today, Israel reportedly opened fire and killed 6 in Gaza. Now, that does put the ceasefire on a rocky standing, as well as Israel saying that the 24 bodies have not yet been returned to Israel is also a violation of the ceasefire agreement. So it's definitely not concrete, and the steps are unclear despite all the euphoria in Tel Aviv at this moment in time. Now, UN Chief Tom Fletcher came out saying that aid needs to enter Gaza immediately. Equally, the consequence of Hamas not being able to return those bodies is a real sticking point for many of the families of the hostages that sadly died in Gaza during this period. Now, the ceasefire, we will bring you up to date as the latest developments come out of Israel, and tomorrow I will be continuing my coverage going close to the Gaza border.
Thanks, Lou. That was our Lou Brown live from Tel Aviv. And earlier at the Hostage Square, Israelis were celebrating the return of the last 20 living captives from Gaza.
Israelis showed a sense of relief a day after Hamas freed the last living Israeli hostages from Gaza. The Israeli military said it had received all 20 hostages confirmed to be alive after their transfer from Gaza by the Red Cross.
First, I have to say that I felt immense happiness and joy. Who could ask more than that? The release of all the hostages. Of course, there is sadness in the fact that the dead hostages haven't been returned yet. Hopefully, it will change, and all the hostages will come back home. Some to healing, to medical assistance, and some to burial.
I feel it was a very emotional day yesterday. It was. I was very happy that they came back, and I saw all the joy and all the people are applauding and came here, of course, to celebrate.
I believe it was a very happy moment for the whole country, seeing all these hostages coming back to Israel and being able to be reunited with their families after 2 years of captivity. Unfortunately, we still have hostages. I mean, although we're talking about death hostages, retrieval of bodies is as important as just bringing back the living hostages, especially because in Judaism, being able to bury the body is very important. So I do hope we will continue on this path and we will be able to retrieve all the bodies of the remaining hostages.
The US, along with Egypt, Qatar and Turkey, mediated what has been described as a first-phase agreement between Israel and Hamas for a ceasefire and the release of hostages by Hamas and prisoners and detainees by Israel. The Israeli hostages freed on Monday were the last still alive in captivity from 251 seized in the Hamas-led attacks on Israel on October 7, 2023, that killed 1,200 people and triggered the war, according to Israeli government. Among the immediate issues still to be resolved, recovering the remains of another 26 Israeli hostages believed to have died and 2 whose fates are unknown. Hamas says recovering the bodies could take time as not all burial sites are known. Israel's military said it had escorted 4 coffins containing the remains of deceased hostages to Israel and that those remains were being identified.
In the meantime, over in Gaza, Palestinians walked through the Strip's rubble-filled streets, slowly clearing debris and starting to rebuild their homes just days after a ceasefire brought a rare respite to the enclave. Under the U.S. brokered deal, Hamas released the last living Israeli hostages from Gaza on Monday, while Israel freed busloads of Palestinian prisoners in return.
I support any effort that leads to security and stability and the revival of the economy in order to give people comfort because the people are tired. Any effort, even if it is a small hope, God willing it will grow in the future because we are tired and we want to raise our children.
The peace summit in Sharm el-Sheikh, from its beginning to end, is to protect Israel only because may God grant health and wellness to every young, resistant and struggling fighter. They are afraid for the Israeli people, who they consider are oppressed. whereas Israel is a colonial people, the same people who oppress the Palestinian people and colonize their land.
We thank all the countries who took part in the ceasefire from the west to the east. Thank God that the ceasefire took place so people can catch their breath and go back to their homes.
Turkey has dispatched a humanitarian aid vessel carrying 900 tons of essential food supplies to Gaza as the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas holds. The ship, Akdeniz, set sail from the southern port of Mersin on Tuesday, bound for Egypt's El Arish port, where the aid will be transferred to Gaza. The cargo includes infant formula, canned food, and other essential items intended to alleviate the humanitarian situation. Previously, we spoke on Ankara's role in another major conflict, the Russia-Ukraine war, with Julia O'Connell of the Dignitas Fund, a non-profit dedicated to providing disaster relief in Ukraine. She also spoke on the role of the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in mediating communication.
President Erdogan was also did play a role in the Ukrainian-Russian war. He does have a channels with Russia. He does have channels with Ukraine. We've seen that many talks happened in Turkey. He's a powerful leader, but not to forget that Bayraktars, it's Turkish drones, played a very important part in Ukrainian 2022 early stage of full-scale invasion. Turkish released Ukrainian commanders of Azov, who Putin wanted to see imprisoned for life, but Erdogan actually didn't care that much and released them to Ukraine.
Iran slammed U.S. President Donald Trump's latest remarks on its nuclear program. Tehran has also said that it refused the invitations to recent diplomatic initiatives, including the Sharm el-Sheikh Peace Summit, because it will not engage with countries that have attacked it. Arturas Shiralilu has more.
Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in a strongly worded statement, condemned President Trump's accusations against Iran, saying that the United States, as the world's largest sponsor of terrorism and the backer of Israel, has no moral standing to level charges against other countries. It stressed that Trump's claims against Tehran's peaceful nuclear program and his boasting of bombing Iran's nuclear sites and assassination of its top generals cannot justify his crimes of violating Iran's territory together with Israel and killing of the military commanders. Iran's foreign ministry also rejected Trump's call at the Israeli parliament on Monday for dialogue and being ready to strike a deal with Tehran as contradictory, accusing him of hostile and criminal behavior. Tehran declined Egypt's invitation to participate in the Sharm el-Sheikh summit on Gaza ceasefire between Hamas and Israel later on Monday, saying it cannot sit at the same table with those who attacked Iran, referring to the U.S. airstrikes last June. The summit in Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh was co-chaired by Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and U.S. President Trump to formalize a ceasefire and lay out reconstruction and governance steps after the two-year war in Gaza. Tehran has also rejected Trump's proposal, saying Iran can join the Abraham Accords, which include agreements that establish diplomatic normalization between Tel Aviv and some Arab capitals in the Middle East. Arturas Shiralilu, Tehran, A-News TV.
Over in France, Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu told lawmakers that the parliamentary crisis in the country will not turn into a regime crisis. Lecornu said he will propose suspending the controversial pension reform until the 2027 presidential election. Meanwhile, President Emmanuel Macron warned that any vote to topple Lecornu's cabinet would force him to dissolve parliament and call fresh elections. For more on that, we go to our Anita Sharma and her segment, This Day in Europe.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu stakes his premiership on a bold budget and pension U-turn. During his high-stakes parliamentary address today, Le Cornu laid out an ambitious and politically charged budget proposal. He also announced a dramatic pause on Emmanuel Macron's controversial pension reform. The speech comes just ahead of looming no-confidence votes Thursday, making this perhaps the most consequential appearance of his tenure. His key proposals and concessions include reaffirming his goal to reduce France's fiscal deficit to 4.7% of GDP by the end of next year, anchoring the budget around 30 billion euros in savings, plus combining both spending cuts and new revenue measures. Among the revenue tools, a fresh tax targeting holding companies used by the wealthy and refusal to raise pensions or social benefits automatically in line with inflation. In a strategic shift, Le Cornu proposed suspending the 2023 pension reform, which would have raised the retirement age from 62 to 64 until after the 2027 presidential election. Le Cornu said that suspension would cost France 400 million euros in lost savings next year and 1.8 billion euros in 2027. He made a direct appeal to socialist deputies, asking them not to weaponize the budget vote into a no-confidence tool, framing the moment as one for national responsibility rather than partisan confrontation. The far left remains unfazed and intends to press ahead with their motion, while the far-right National Rally dismisses Le Cornu's proposals as too little too late, demanding outright elections. As for the Socialist Party, they will not support no-confidence motions from either the far left or far right, but may take action if Le Cornu's budget fails to meet their demands, especially on pensions and tax fairness. Macron has commented from abroad, accusing political rivals of fueling instability and dismissed calls for his resignation, while signaling full backing for the Le Cornu government. Key analysts see strength in Le Cornu's proposal and a calculated concession with the pension suspension. It could give him room to appeal to left-leaning deputies without wrecking his conservative base. The blend of cuts and targeted taxation may also provide enough fiscal credibility to reassure markets and the EU, especially given France's status as the Eurozone's second largest economy. And by refusing to force the bill through using Article 49.3, Le Cornu signals a more consensual posture, though that also means he gives up a key tool to force through passage. However, without support from socialists, the budget and his government could collapse. The entire plan hinges on their tolerance. The fiscal watchdog already flagged Le Cornu's assumptions as optimistic. Delivering on cuts in fragmented legislature will be extremely difficult. Some analysts believe the pension suspension, while politically useful, erodes continuity in Macron's signature reform and raises long-term credibility questions. If Le Cornu fails in the Thursday vote, Macron may be forced to dissolve the assembly and call snap elections in a volatile environment. If the government survives, Le Cornu must rapidly negotiate with fractious parties, manage parliamentary amendments, and ensure discipline within a very delicate coalition. Markets and rating agencies are watching closely, with failure or delay possibly worsening borrowing costs and damaging France's fiscal credibility. Today's address was Le Cornu's bid to survive, and for France, the week ahead may define whether the country drifts deeper into crisis or just barely holds together. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in the Netherlands.
Still in France, hundreds of farmers have taken to the streets of Paris to protest against the proposed trade deal between the European Union and the South American bloc, Mercosur. The tractor-led demonstration organized by Confédération Paysanne ran to the Eiffel Tower. Farmers warned the deal threatens local agriculture and could worsen deforestation in the Amazon. They fear cheaper imports of beef, poultry, and sugar will undercut domestic producers. The EU says the pact with Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay could boost exports by 49 billion euros and create more than 440,000 jobs, cutting tariffs on cars, machinery, pharmaceuticals, and agri-food products. Safeguards are in place for sensitive products and protected origins, but for those protesting in Paris, that's not enough. Gold prices have shot up to a new record high. Investors are flocking to safe assets as worries about the global economy grow. The rise is seen as being driven by overall market and political uncertainty.
Gold prices spiked to a record high on Tuesday as renewed tensions between the US and China added to global uncertainty, pushing investors towards safe haven assets. Spot gold rose 0.4% to $4,124.79 per ounce. Gold has jumped 57% so far this year, crossing the $4,100 mark for the first time on Monday, supported by economic worries, central bank buying, and strong investment inflows. Spot silver gained 0.3% to $52.49 per ounce, after reaching $52.70, as similar factors drove demand and tightened supplies. Analysts at Bank of America and Societe Generale now expect gold to hit $5,000 per ounce by 2026, while Standard Chartered raised its 2026 average forecast to $4,488. Gold has seen its biggest rise since the 1970s, climbing about a third since April after US President Donald Trump announced tariffs that shook global trade. The recent surge has been described as unprecedented by Henkun Hao, head of market strategy at UOB Bank, who linked it to a weaker US dollar and growing interest from retail investors. Analysts added that investors, including banks and wealthy families, are increasingly turning to gold as a safeguard against world economic instability.
In a new flare-up of US-China trade tensions, both countries began charging additional port fees on ocean shipping firms. China says it has started to collect the special charges on US-owned, operated, built, or flagged vessels, but clarified that Chinese-built ships would be exempt. For more on that, we go to Beijing and our Mahnoor Makhdoom.
In the latest development in US-China trade friction, China will start imposing port fees on vessels that are US-owned, operated, built, or flagged, a move widely seen as a retaliation for US fees on ships linked to China. Chinese-built or Chinese-operated vessels are exempt from the new charges. Analysts say that the port fees reflect China's strategy of targeted economic retaliation while maintaining avenues for negotiation. Highlighting the complex balance Beijing seeks between asserting leverage and preserving dialogue in an increasingly strained trade relationship. Despite the escalation, Beijing and Washington conducted working-level talks on Monday, highlighting a cautious effort to manage tensions and preventing further deterioration in ties. China's Ministry of Commerce called on the US to show sincerity in its approach, signaling both a firmness in defending national interest and a willingness to keep diplomatic channels open. The latest round of tension between the two countries follows the recent announcement by US President Donald Trump of a plan to impose 100% tariffs on all Chinese imports, a move that Beijing has strongly criticized. China dismissed the threat as unreasonable and reaffirmed its readiness to respond with appropriate countermeasures, signaling continued economic resilience amid growing tensions. Manu Makhdoom, A News, Beijing.
As this week saw another record set for the value of gold amid renewed US-China trade tensions, joining us to analyze these developments is Pascal de Lima, Chief Economist at the Business Knowledge Management Consulting, joining us from Paris. Welcome, Pascal. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, the safe haven commodities are again rising in value. How much of this increase would you say is due to the latest spat in Washington-Beijing relations, and what else has factored in here?
Yes, of course, the recent rise in gold prices is partially driven by the renewed tensions between the United States and China. When trade relations between two major economic powers become uncertain and confrontational, investors often fear broader economic instability. In such cases, they turn to safe haven assets like gold, which are considered more reliable than stocks or currency during crisis. But this is not only the one part of the picture, because several other factors are also pushing gold prices higher. The first one, which is very important, is of course inflation. Because with persistent inflation in many economies, gold became attractive as a store of value, of course. But you have also expectation of lower interest rate. For example, especially the US Federal Reserve. If central banks signal or implement rate cuts to support slowing economies, real yields fall, and lower interest rate reduce the opportunity cost of holding non-yielding assets like gold. And of course, you have the US dollar weakness, of course, the geopolitical risks, and of course, the fact that many central banks, particularly in emerging markets, are increasing their gold reserve to diversify away from the US dollar and reduce dependency on foreign currency.
We've also seen some projections. Bank of America and Societe Generale are expecting gold to hit the $5,000 per ounce mark in 2026. Now, if that forecast does indeed come true, what would that mean for the health of the global economy?
It would most likely signal deep stress in the global economy. Such a dramatic increase in the price of gold would not occur in a stable or healthy financial environment. So it could mean that high or uncomfortable inflation, that's the first point. A sharp rise in gold often reflects that investors feel that inflation is out of control and that fiat currencies are losing their purchasing power. The second point is the loss of confidence in the dollar or other major currencies. A weaker dollar may drive up gold prices as investors look for more stable store of value. And of course, financial instability. We must speak about financial instability because investors may expect a financial crisis too. You have also the escalation of geopolitical tension and of course, deep monetary easing. If central banks are forced to cut interest rate aggressively or expand their balance sheet again, this can weaken currency and rise gold prices.
Pascal, thank you so much for joining us and providing
much.
us with your insight. Britain has announced it's lifting an arms embargo on both Armenia and Azerbaijan. The move follows the peace summit in Washington in August, where both countries signed a peace declaration. Our Zainab Farajzadeh brings more on that from Manchester.
Britain says it's lifting its long-standing arms embargo on both Armenia and Azerbaijan, calling it a sign of confidence in their recent steps toward peace. The UK's Europe Minister Stefan Doherty said the decision follows a peace summit in Washington, hosted by President Trump, where Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev and Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan have signed the peace declaration. That declaration included plans to dissolve the OSCE Minsk Group, the body set up 3 decades ago to resolve the Karabakh conflict and to guarantee transport links between mainland Azerbaijan and its Nakhchivan exclave, while respecting Armenia's sovereignty. The UK says these developments mark a pivotal moment for stability in the South Caucasus. London will now upgrade its relations with both countries to what it calls strategic partnerships covering trade, defense and security, with annual ministerial meetings to track progress. Britain insists so that export license for arms will still be approved case by case, meaning weapons sales won't be automatic. The government says it will continue to monitor the region's security situation closely. Officials in London say they hope this move will help cement lasting peace and open a new chapter for both Armenia and Azerbaijan after decades of tension and war. Zainab Farajzadeh, News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
Joining us from London to briefly talk on the UK lifting the arms embargo on Azerbaijan and Armenia is former Ambassador James Sharp. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Now, what does London's step signify? Does the UK now consider the conflict resolved?
Well, we have had, of course, the arms embargo in place since, I think, 1992, when the OSCE asked all OSCE member states not to supply any weapons or ammunitions to parties involved in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. And I think, even when I was in Azerbaijan, I think that I felt we were being a bit overcautious, and we could have been dealing with, for example, the coastal forces and the border troops. But I think that what has now changed, of course, is the actual peace agreement and the subsequent dissolution of the OSCE Minsk groups. That's opened the door now for the full removal of the arms embargo. So I think it's a very positive step. I very much welcome it, and it was something I was urging when I was in Baku recently at the inaugural UK-Azerbaijan policy dialogue. So along with the fact that we now have a defence attaché, a resident defence attaché in Baku, I think those are all very, very positive signs and enable the cooperation, the relationship with Azerbaijan in the defence sphere to expand significantly now.
Well, when it comes to that cooperation in the defense sphere, do you see this embargo being lifted as an opportunity to boost cooperation when it comes to the weapons industry, the purchasing or production of defense means?
It should do. I mean, Azerbaijan already has a long list of suppliers. So, the United Kingdom does offer a lot of advanced weaponry and defense equipment, which may be of use to Azerbaijan. So I think that we just have to test the water and to see what Azerbaijan needs and what we can supply. But, as I say, cooperation goes much wider than just defense sales. Frankly, there's also defense cooperation. And one thing I noticed, of course, in President Aliyev's participation in Sharm el-Sheikh at the Israel-Gaza summit recently was the suggestion that Azerbaijan might be willing to offer some troops for a stabilization force as part of the second phase of the peace agreement. So I think that's the sort of thing, again, where we'll continue to look to see how we can expand defense cooperation between the armed forces, not just weapons sales, but also sort of training and other types of cooperation.
Well, with the embargo being lifted on both Armenia and Azerbaijan, would you say this could potentially mark a new approach by the UK to the entire region of the South Caucasus, clearing the way to pursue opportunities with all the three countries of the region equally?
I really hope so. I have to say one thing I've generally been critical about the Foreign Office and the British government is that we tend to look at foreign relations on a bilateral basis, country by country, and we're not necessarily very good at looking at it strategically on a regional basis. But things have changed quite dramatically, not just in the South Caucasus, but also in the Greater Caspian region, with a lot of talk and a lot of action on the Middle Corridor, for example, whether that be rail link, whether that be green energy, whether it be digital connectivity. So there's increasing focus on the regionality of approaches. And now in the South Caucasus, again, with Azerbaijan, Armenia, I would hope that now is the time to then look at the region again and think about, well, actually, how can we help those countries, those three countries, cooperate better in terms of connectivity, in terms of economic cooperation and trade, for example, because all three are fairly small countries and they would all benefit from better connectivity and better cooperation. So I just hope the United Kingdom can play its role there.
Thank you very much for your time and for your insight.
Pleasure.
Still in the region, the OSCE Minsk group will be officially dissolved in December, according to the head of the OSCE, Elina Valtonen, who spoke at a joint press conference in Yerevan alongside Armenia's Foreign Minister Ararat Mirzoyan. Valtonen welcomed the joint initiative by Azerbaijan and Armenia to dissolve the OSCE Minsk group, noting that the decision marks a significant step towards redefining regional cooperation mechanisms. The OSCE Minsk group, established in 1992, had been tasked with mediating the Karabakh conflict. Tensions between Afghanistan and Pakistan remain high following a weekend of clashes along the border. Although gunfire has now ceased, the atmosphere on both sides remains tense, and all major border crossings are closed to traffic and trade. Tamim Bahis has more in Kabul.
Border points including Torkham and Spin Boldak have been shut down completely, halting the movement of people and goods. According to local Pakistani media, only Afghan refugees returning home are being allowed to cross, and that's only through the Spin Boldak crossing in southern Afghanistan. The closure is hitting Afghanistan's economy hard. The country relies heavily on imports that come through Pakistan, especially food and other essential supplies. Analysts say the shutdown is already disrupting commerce, food imports, and supply chains across the country. While trade through Pakistan has declined in recent years due to recurring disputes and closures, a significant portion of Afghan imports still depend on Pakistani routes, making this shutdown especially painful for traders and consumers alike. On the diplomatic front, the fallout is widening. Russia and China have both expressed concern over the rising tensions and are urging restraint from both countries. Meanwhile, Afghan media reports that Kabul has repeatedly rejected requests from Pakistani officials to visit Afghanistan over the past 3 days, a sign that political relations are as strained as the situation on the ground. For now, border crossings remain sealed. Tensions remain high, and both sides are under pressure to find a way to de-escalate before the situation worsens. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
The world's largest enclosed body of water, the Caspian Sea, is facing one of the most serious environmental crises in its history. Once known as the Energy Sea for its rich oil reserves, it's now making headlines for rapidly falling water levels and a growing threat to its biodiversity.
The Caspian Sea, spanning an area of around 370,000 square kilometers and shared by Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Russia, Turkmenistan and Iran, is now at risk of losing much of its unique marine life. Experts say the water level has dropped by nearly 2 meters in just the past 2 decades, a change that's clearly visible along the Kazakh coast. For residents of Aktau, Kazakhstan's only port city, the Caspian Sea is far more than just a body of water. It's a source of livelihood, leisure, a place deeply tied to their identity and memories.
There's no water in the areas where we used to swim as children. For example, the water was all the way to where I sit on this shore, and it was deep.
Satimova says she fears her children may not grow up watching the same waves that shaped her own childhood unless action is taken soon. Environmental activists are warning that the problem is worsening.
The Caspian Sea is largely fed by the Volga River 80% of the time. Due to both the decrease in precipitation caused by climate change and the dams built along the river's banks, the Caspian Sea is not receiving sufficient water. This is the biggest reason for the current drop in water levels in the Caspian Sea.
NI adds that industrial pollution from oil extraction and heavy ship traffic is further threatening the Caspian's fragile ecosystem. The number of fish species and even seals is sharply declining. As the Caspian Sea continues to shrink, scientists warn that urgent international cooperation is needed to save not just an iconic body of water, but a vital lifeline for millions of people who depend on it.
Over in Kyrgyzstan, a heated debate is underway over a proposed constitutional change that could bring back the death penalty. The move has triggered strong reactions across the country. Our Fariza Kalimurzina has all the details.
In Kyrgyzstan, a constitutional amendment is now open for public discussion, one that could bring back the death penalty. This initiative comes from the president's administration and targets the most serious crimes like the rape of children and murders linked to rape. The draft proposes changing Article 25 of the Constitution, which guarantees the right to life, to allow capital punishment, but only in exceptional cases. The reason is a sharp rise in brutal crimes against women and children. The government wants to send a clear message. These acts won't be tolerated. And official data shows that last year 43 women and children were murdered in Kyrgyzstan. This year, in the first 8 months, there have been 28 such cases. Also last year, 107 rapes were reported, 88 involving minors. Experts say many cases remain unreported due to fear or stigma. If approved, Kyrgyzstan would become the first Central Asian country to reverse from international commitments to abolish the death penalty. The bill includes plans to leave the second optional protocol to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. The Foreign Ministry will notify the United Nations. Meanwhile, President Sadir Japarov stressed that the final decision must be made through a nationwide referendum. It's important to highlight that this initiative was sparked by the tragic murder of 17-year-old Aysulu, a case that shocked the entire nation. If the public agrees, Parliament will then move to update the criminal laws accordingly. Calls for justice and safety are growing, but opinions are divided. Human rights activists warn that the death penalty alone won't stop crime. They urge a broader approach, better prevention, police training and victim support. But public discussion continues. After it ends, the draft will go to Parliament, and if approved, the issue will be put to a national referendum. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Just to bring you some latest news regarding the Middle East, U.S. President Donald Trump has just been speaking to reporters at the White House, where he's hosting Argentina's President Javier Milei. He was asked about how long it will take for Hamas to disarm and whether he can guarantee that would happen. They're going to disarm because they said they would disarm, and if they don't disarm, we will disarm them, Trump said to reporters. He added that U.S. officials have spoken to Hamas and the group said it would give up its weapons. Asked what deadline will be set for the group, Trump said a reasonable period of time. That's all we have for you for now. Thank you so much for watching and stay tuned to A News.